We're excited to be here, excited with what we have on the agenda, so just wanted to welcome you all. Let's stand and join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Well, we're pretty excited. We have some new board members and we have some newly confirmed board members. So we have Director Goebel, Director Hutton, and Director Hawkins, who is joining us by phone, all that got confirmed this last month. So we're excited about that. And during that confirmation hearing, I also got confirmed to reappointed. But we have two new ones, and we have Curran Trick with the North Platte and Steve Anderson with the Gunnison Basin. So we're excited to have you two here as well. And as part of that, we have a swearing in process. So Laura Chartrand will handle that.
All right, I'm going to ask Director Anderson. And repeat after me. Raise your right hand. I, say your name,
Stephen Anderson,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and of the state of Colorado,
and of the state of Colorado,
and faithfully perform the duties of the office
and faithfully perform the duties of the office
of member, Colorado Water Conservation Board,
of member of the Colorado Water Conservation Board
for the Gunnison Basin,
for the Gunnison Basin,
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations. Swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and of the state of Colorado,
and of the state of Colorado,
and faithfully perform the duties of the office
and faithfully perform the duties of the office
of member, Colorado Water Conservation Board
of member, Colorado Water Conservation Board
for the North Platte Basin,
for the North Platte Basin,
upon which I'm about to enter.
upon which I'm about to enter.
All right. Well, we're excited to have you too as part of the board, and you have some big shoes to fill, but we're confident that you will do that. So thanks for serving the state of Colorado and your basins. So we'll move on. We have the agenda before you. We have one change that I know of. We're going to move the state engineer, Kevin, to the second director's report in place of John Stolp, our IBCC director. And John will be giving his report tomorrow. He could make it today or later today. He's going to be here. So we're going to move Kevin Ryan up in that spot. Are there any other changes to the agenda? All right. Well, we'll move on then. Hopefully you all had a chance to look at the minutes, and are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? I just noticed at the very beginning on the second day, it said that Celine, Director Hawkins, was here. The first day it said that she appeared by phone, and the second day should state the same. And then on item 25Q, Director Wells recused herself from the vote, and the vote should be 8-0 instead of 9-0. Any other? All right. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
So moved.
It's been moved by Director Wells, seconded by Director Hutton, that we approve the minutes as amended. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same sign. Motion carries. All right, we have a consent agenda items. Are there any questions on the consent agenda? Director Wells.
I move approval of the items on the consent agenda.
It's been moved by Director Wells, second by Director Goebel, that we approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So our board meeting dates. Do we know where we're meeting in July yet?
Glenwood Springs.
Glenwood Springs in July, okay. So July 18th and 19th in Glenwood Springs. September in Steamboat, and November probably in the Denver area, I imagine. South Platte Basin?
Yeah.
All right.
Maybe northern.
Okay. Any questions about that? We'll move on to the director's reports, starting with the executive director of DNR, Director Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, board. Thank you, Director Goebel, for hosting us here in the Arkansas Basin. And congratulations to the newest members. I look forward to serving with you, and thanks in advance for all of your service for the board. It's a really rewarding and enriching group. So this morning, I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about some legislation that passed. So the General Assembly adjourned on May 9th, and the Department of Natural Resources had a good year. And I'd like to just share details on some of the legislation that was most important to us. Happy, as always, to take questions on other bills or things that I don't cover. And then just a few more things I'll touch on. So first, a handful of important department bills that we sought passage of and carried. First was the Parks and Wildlife Future Generations Bill. This was Senate Bill 143. It will be signed later today at Lake Pueblo State Park by the governor. This was a bill that addressed the fact that resident hunting and fishing license fees hadn't increased since 2006 due to there's no cost of living or CPI increase to those fees, and so our purchasing power has decreased by 30% over these last 12 years. And so the bill increases most multi-day annual hunting and fishing licenses for Colorado residents by $8 in 2019, plus a CPI adjustment. That will allow our spending power to keep up with inflation. It sets senior and youth fishing licenses. These are for people at 16 to 17-year-olds at $8. And it limits future increases on park entrance fees to $1 in any year for daily passes and $10 in any single year for annual passes. And we believe that this will address the budget shortfalls and meet our 2025 goals. We had broad support in the General Assembly, and we're really appreciative of that bill going through. It's an important piece of legislation. Second is House Bill 1008. This addressed aquatic nuisance species, also being signed later today at Lake Pueblo State Park. We all know about the threat of zebra and quagga mussels and the threat they pose to water infrastructure. The ANS decontamination and inspection program that CPW runs statewide was in real trouble. It was relying on severance tax, as we've discussed, and I'll actually touch on a little bit later. That was a problem this year, and long-term funding for it was even cloudier. So this bill requires boats to purchase an annual aquatic nuisance species, ANS stamp. The fee for Colorado resident boats will be $25 annually, and for non-resident boats, it'll be $50. We forecast this will provide about $2.4 million each year. This is about half the cost of running that program, but it will provide a stable source of funding next year and beyond. The Tier 2 severance tax appropriation will continue as well to make up the difference, but this at least guarantees we can run that program in the out years. One other bill, again, on the subject of severance tax, was an orbital bill to the long bill. This is something we don't usually do. It was sort of a new process for me, but this was House Bill 1338, and it was meant to address this year's really anemic severance tax revenues, where refunds were outstripping revenues. And again, I don't think I probably need to go into too much detail on that. Suffice to say that halfway through the fiscal year, in December, revenues to severance tax were about 17 million net. That, as you guys know, is then split 4 different ways between us and Department of Local Affairs, and our bid is split between the operational account and perpetual base. But we had real concerns about the ability of the operational fund that DNR administers to finish the current fiscal year, and the fact that they could finish with a negative balance of about $1.6 million. Not only could we not make payroll and fund oil and gas inspectors and avalanche forecasters and others, we wouldn't be able to bring those folks back on until we made up that difference into the next fiscal year. So we went to the Joint Budget Committee. They asked for our best suggestion for how to address it. They sponsored this bill, House Bill 1338, and it did several things to stabilize DNR's severance funded programs. It transferred $17 million of general fund to the operational account for fiscal year 18-19, transferred another $17 million for the reserve in the following fiscal year, 19-20, so that we didn't risk starting that year again with a negative balance. It also transferred $9.5 million to some key Tier 2 programs in severance tax. These were aquatic nuisance species, Species Conservation Trust Fund, which CWCB administers, along with CPW, wildfire mitigation grants, reclamation of forfeited mine sites, and the Soil Conservancy District Grant Program. It did some other wonky things, reversing some transfers out of Tier 2 that were made earlier in the year, eliminating a transfer that was called for under some 2017 legislation. And then importantly, it provides that all severance tax revenues for the last 5 months of the current fiscal year and next year don't come to us or the operational accounts share, that's 25 cents of every dollar, but instead they go to the general fund. So at DNR, we have one division that gets general fund, and that's the Division of Water Resources. We wanted to be conservative with our request here because we are a largely cash funded agency, and we didn't want this to be a windfall. So again, general fund came to us to fund important programs that fund staff and things that people rely on. And then severance tax will backfill the general fund. It sort of makes the general fund withstand the volatility on that. So again, that was House Bill 1338. It passed and ensures that those programs can continue. Just a couple of bills I'll touch on that weren't department bills but that are important to the department. One is lottery reauthorization. This bill will be signed tomorrow in Gunnison. This bill extends funding for Great Outdoors Colorado through at least 2049, so it's a 25-year extension of lottery. In the last 25 years, GOCO's funded over 5,000 projects statewide, dozens of school playgrounds, over 900 miles of trails, and over 1,600 parks and outdoor recreation areas. Great Outdoors Colorado is the envy of other states who value these sorts of things, and we're really proud that this was extended by another 25 years. And then finally, a deal at the last day of the last hours of the last day of the legislative session. A deal was struck on conservation easements. This bill extends the conservation easement tax program, and it moves oversight at the Department of Regulatory Agencies from the Real Estate Division to the Division of Conservation, where they can include consideration of the value of ecosystem services provided on these lands. So again, I can go into some detail on that, but it preserved and continued, again, an important program for DNR, for CPW, for others around the state. So that's all I was going to touch on legislation. I will mention a couple of things with regard to drought, and Director Mitchell, feel free to fill in the gaps here. We monitor drought conditions statewide regularly through the Water Availability Task Force. The agricultural community is seeing a loss of winter wheat. Strong winds have fueled some early fires, and all of the drought indices show that drought is covering a significant portion of the state. On May 2nd, Governor Hickenlooper activated the Colorado's Drought Mitigation and Response Plan for 34 counties in the southern half of the state. This is intended to be able to identify specific impacts in those areas, take quick and effective remedial action when necessary, and also to work with our federal partners on programs that are important to these communities. This is through the Small Business Administration, through the Farm Services Agency and others, really to be able to address impacts as we see them. In this activation, the governor also activated the Agricultural Impact Task Force. This is one of, I think, 7, maybe it's 5 impact task forces called for under the drought plan. And again, that's just in recognition of the early impacts to the ag community from drought conditions in the southern half of the state. So, and again, happy to take questions on any of that. a couple things on CPW I just want to touch on. And Brad, I'm sorry if I'm stealing your thunder on this, but I get to go first, believe it or not. That's the way they arranged it. So first, I just really wanted to commend CPW on an event in Breckenridge 2 weeks ago. This was the Partners in the Outdoors Conference. It's a huge gathering. It's the 5th or 6th year, but it's a big gathering of stakeholders that are really engaged in the future of Colorado's conservation and outdoor recreation and stewardship activities. And it was sold out with over 500 attendees. It was a diverse crowd, just to give you an indication. The lunch keynote was the president of the Outdoor Industry Association, Amy Roberts, who talked about the value of economic value of outdoor recreation in the state. And the dinner keynote that day was from the president of the National Wild Turkey Federation, who's a former DNR director in the state of Michigan. And they were just both so eloquent about the confluence and the need for cooperation between these two important constituencies. And CPW just did a great job with that conference. So my appreciation for that. And then finally, CPW is embarking on a non-consumptive user study. As we all know, funding for CPW largely on the wildlife side certainly comes from hunting and fishing license fees. And they're looking at opportunities to generate revenue and buy-in and participation from other groups. They hired a contractor in early April. The study will be delivered to the Parks and Wildlife Commission in early fall, but I think this really represents sort of their recognition of the need to find diverse funding sources and really seek the buy-in from these other constituencies. And I'm excited about that effort and that study. And finally, sorry, I had a lot to cover. Since we're here in the Arkansas, I wanted to touch on, and Laura can kick me if because we're here in the Arkansas, I wanted to touch on some litigation that's gotten some attention in the press recently, and that's a private lawsuit brought by an angler. This is a fly fisherman who brought suit against a local property owner. This is up in the Texas Creek area, up in the canyon. The plaintiff claims that he has a right to wade fish through the defendant's private property, alleging that the bed of the river belongs to the people of Colorado and is to be held in trust for the people because it was, as they assert in their complaint, navigable at the time of statehood. And used for commercial purposes, and they include citations or, reference to newspaper articles and journal entries showing the Arkansas had been used to float logs and railroad ties and beaver pelts and things at the time of statehood. So again, this has gotten a little bit of attention recently. We moved recently to intervene in the case and to dismiss the case under the 11th Amendment to the Constitution. This provides that you can't bring cases that implicate the state's interests without us waiving our sovereign immunity. And I just really wanted to mention it again since we're here, but also to put it into context and just say, this is not to ignore the importance of angling to our outdoor recreation economy, but it is to say that a matter of this consequence, to say that the bed of navigable rivers in the state of Colorado belong to the state, not to the surrounding landowners. That's a big change. It's a big change in jurisprudence over the last 142 years. And so, we just don't think that should be resolved between two private parties. And there's some details on the case too, but again, happy to visit with anyone about that. And so again, just wanted to kind of provide a little bit of context on that case. And with that, Mr. Chair, I think I'm finished, and I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you, Director Randall. Are there any questions for Director Randall? All right, well, we'll move on. I wanted to clean up a couple of things before we move to Director Ryan, and that is the lady to my left is actually Director Dutton, not Director Hutton. That I was running Hutton and Heather and Dutton together and calling her Director Hutton. So sorry about that. And then we actually did not vote to approve the agenda. So I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda. All right, Director Gallagher. It's been moved by Director Gallagher, second by Director Wells, that we approve the agenda as changed with Director Ryan going in place of Director Stolp, and Director Stolp going tomorrow. So is there any discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right. Must not have had enough coffee today, so I better get on my game here. So, Director Ryan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I anyone else misspeaks because it takes the attention off of me when I do it. So, but I want to thank Director Goebel for having us down here in Salida. It's great to be here. I was actually in Pueblo all day yesterday, so I'm seeing as much of the Arkansas as I can this week. Great to be here in Salida. I'll give you an update on just a couple things, and I think that I've talked to you all about the couple rulemakings that we're in the middle of, or actually crossing the finish line on one. As a result of House Bill 1076 from the 2017 session, we had a task in front of us to do rulemaking to allow the extraction of groundwater into non-tributary aquifers. And as I believe I've updated you, we have rules right now that allow that in the Denver Basin non-tributary aquifers, but not other non-tributary aquifers in the state. We managed to amend those Denver Basin rules to include the newly recognized non-tributary aquifers and that effort. That hearing for that rulemaking took place on May 1st. It looks like those rules will be final through the Secretary of State by the end of the month. So that's a nice success, and it's a nice way to respond to that legislation from 2017. We also, we also have the agricultural water protection water right rulemaking that we're finishing, and I do like to rattle that term off because there's a lot of adjectives in that ag water protection water right. But that rulemaking is proceeding through the court. That's a little bit different path. It's proceeding through the court. We had to consolidate the Division 1 and Division 2 filings. That legislation is only effective in Divisions 1 and Divisions 2. So that was consolidated in court, and that rulemaking should proceed now through the court as just a regular court application. We'll be proceeding with that. One other rulemaking, and this crosses over a little bit to legislation, but I've updated you on the Republican River Basin and the need to maybe amend the boundaries of the Republican River Water Conservation District. Failing to do that, expedite rules in the Republican River just to ensure that we have everything in place to have well owners complying with the compact, replacing their depletions. That is still, as much as I'd like to say different, still in flux. That's something that could go two different ways. That is expedited rulemaking or legislation. Obviously, we missed the legislation window this year. Something that could be picked up by the Water Resources Review Committee this summer, and maybe could see some activity in the session next year. We're just standing by for that. The other rulemaking and legislation crossover I'd like to touch on, I believe I've updated you on legislation that touched the Division of Water Resources in the previous meeting, but the one bill that passed, it's the Aquifer Storage and Recovery Bill that affected specifically designated basins, and it gave the Groundwater Commission specific or explicit authority to approve aquifer storage and recovery plans where that explicit authority was lacking before. And that bill passed. It has had the effect of altering the rulemaking so that the rules that are currently being amended in the designated basins will be a little more robust, a little more able to directly address aquifer storage and recovery plans, which is good for the water users. It takes them out of some maybe some conditions due to legal nuances that would make their plan a little more difficult. So that was successful. One other thing I'd like to point out in my visits, a couple weeks ago, I was in Alamosa. Actually, I was in San Luis for the Castilla Creek Compact Administration meeting. That's an annual meeting that takes place, and that was a very worthwhile meeting. The meeting lasted an hour, and that's good. That's the kind of compact that operates well, and we can take care of it in an hour. So I'd hate to think that I drove to Alamosa just for a 1-hour meeting. Our division engineer, Craig Cotton, was very diligent in his planning, and he scheduled some time for me to see just a few things, and he scheduled some people. And I'd like to recognize Director Dutton, who was able to take time out to meet some of our Division of Water Resources staff, some ditch board members, and of course me as I was there, and also Emma Reeser, who I saw. There's Emma right there with the Rio Grande Headwaters Restoration Project. And what we did was look at some of these projects that have taken place in the last few years, and I'll just to give you some names: the Centennial Ditch, Consolidated Ditch, McDonald Ditch, Prairie Ditch. And this is work that, I found myself a little bit envious of some of the CWCB staff that in their work, they get to go out and really see these things as they develop. And you as a board, of course, make the decisions to make some of this work. So I appreciated that time down there. With the rest of my time, I want to take a little bit more of your time. Thank you again for moving me up in the agenda. But just to add a local flavor to my report, I'd like to point to the fact that Steve Whitty, our division engineer, who works out of the Pueblo office, is here with us today. And I invited Steve to be here. I asked him to be here. He was able to make it work. And it's great to have that local flavor. It's great to have the division engineer. It's something that maybe I'd like to do more in the future. However, having him here is the good news. The bad news is that Steve will be retiring in just about a month. And people get to retire and get to move on and enjoy themselves. But when I was appointed to this position in July, that's something that I knew was looming. I didn't know how closely it was going to come, but it was looming. And I wanted to give Steve some recognition in front of this board, and I wanted to give him just a couple minutes to talk to the board, and he's agreed to do that. But I don't have time to do a just biography but I do have a little bit of information. Steve, if you don't mind me taking another minute. Steve is from Ray, Colorado, born in Ray, Colorado, and he went to school at the Colorado School of Mines and got his engineering degree there. Came to work at the Division of Water Resources in 1978. That's 40 years already. You're good at math. So he's been with the Division of Water Resources for 40 years. And he started in 1978, worked in the Denver office until 1982 when he became an assistant division engineer in Division 3. In 1986, he became the division engineer in Steamboat in Division 6. And in 1988, so 10 years after he started, he was appointed to the division engineer position in Division 2 in Pueblo. So that's 30 years, by the way, as the division engineer in Pueblo. And so when you hear that, you can certainly understand the rest of this quick biography. Things he's done: served as the operations secretary to the Arkansas River Compact Administration for that 30 years, 1988 through 2017. Member of the Water Court Review Committee of the Colorado Supreme Court beginning in 2008. He, in 2013, received the Bob Appel Friend of the Arkansas Award for longstanding commitment to the water users in the Arkansas. He provided expert testimony in numerous water court cases, contributing to many expert witness reports and authoring those. Key testimony and support throughout the lengthy Kansas v. Colorado Supreme Court case. Key figure and advisor in helping the Upper Ark Water Conservancy District when it was created and adjudicating their augmentation plan. Instrumental in the promulgation of multiple sets of rules and regulations in the Arkansas River Basin. There's a fair number of those. He's been a speaker at numerous conferences. And I would just say on a personal note, on behalf of his staff over the years, he's been a great leader for staff in the Pueblo office and for those of us around the state in tapping into his mentoring and his knowledge and experience. So I'm going to miss him personally. I'm going to miss him really in a big way professionally. So I just really wanted to recognize Steve and everything he's done for 40 years and then 30 years as a division engineer. And then in my 20 years that I've worked at the Division of Water Resources and known him, I've taken too much time talking to myself. I'd like to invite Steve, if you would, to come up and address the board.
Thanks for downplaying expectations, Kevin.
I kept it short.
Well, thank you for allowing me to speak. I wanted to focus on two words this morning, please and thank you. Some point in your formative years, those were perhaps referred to as magic words. As I've continued in this process of engaging in aging, I've also understood that these words are building blocks of relationships. And you folks should know better than anyone the importance of relationships in dealing with water matters in Colorado. It is, after all, our water dedicated to the use of the people of Colorado. So as I bring my 40-year career, 30 years on the Arkansas to a close, I want to begin with some thank yous. I wanted to begin with saying thank you for facilitating the payment to the state of Kansas nearly a decade ago of some $36 million in consequence of the violation of the Arkansas River Compact that took place prior to that time. We have striven very hard to ensure no further violations of that compact. We've tried to go the extra mile by implementing the only regulation anywhere in the state on improvements to irrigation practices, specifically to avoid another violation of the compact. I want to say thank you for your historical and continuing support of the state engineers hydrography program, particularly the satellite monitored stream gauging telemetry system. That's been a fantastic boon. I think maybe beyond anyone's expectations originally, just how much more accessible information regarding where the people's water is at any given time could possibly have been foreseen to be. It's been a tremendous asset to not only to regulators, but I think to recreational, agricultural, municipal people, everyone involved. I guess I wanted to also thank you for your efforts in continuing to strive to protect the natural environment to a reasonable degree. I mean, what a mouthful, but you guys have that unique authority to hold in-stream flow rights, and you do it very well. And so I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for the efforts you put into planning Colorado's future. I want to thank you for seeing the value in the DSS program, and finally, at long last, the ARC DSS program. We're really excited about that. We think that this is going to be, this system is going to yield some of the most practical benefits of any of the previous versions. And I guess I'd take a step back and give a tip of the cap to my Assistant Division Engineer Bill Tyner for engaging with CWCB staff to identify specific administrative needs that we have, that we think the ARC DSS system can help provide. And I think that's that bodes well for the ultimate success of that project. So let me now turn to the other magic word, please. Just like a water guy, right? He gets your hand out at the end. Don't be alarmed. I guess I wanted to, you may not know, but one of the duties of your director is to act as the head of delegation to for Colorado's representation to the Arkansas River Compact Administration, or ARCA for short. And over the course of my career here in the Arkansas, I think I've worked with 8 different people in acting as our head of our delegation. During that same time, Kansas has been represented by only 2 people. So that has put us at a bit of a disadvantage at times, just in terms of experience, because building relationships is so important in getting Kansas to yes on issues, right? And building those relationships take time. So here's my first ask. Please do everything you can to encourage your director to stay with you. She has great potential to be very effective on that board, and so I hope that you will consider that. Also, because ARCA is such a difficult entity to get anything done through, each state gets 1 vote, and all matters have to be decided by a simple majority. You know? So you have to have the consensus to get anything done. And so part of that building relationships not only involves the head of delegation, but also the other members. And this one you're acutely aware of. It is that there's a current policy limiting participation in these appointed boards and commissions to 2 terms. Here's the ask. As you begin to engage with political candidates, particularly gubernatorial candidates over the next few months, talk to them about that. Find out what their policy is. Encourage them to understand that learning this water stuff takes some time, and there may be good reasons for making exceptions to limitations on those terms on boards and commissions, particularly water-related issues. So with that, I'll ask, I guess I'll say one more thank you for the time that you've given me. Thanks.
Right. Thanks, Steve. Does anybody have anything that they would like to add or say to Steve or Director Goebel?
I'd just like to say thank you. I've worked with Steve, obviously my whole career moving back to the Arkansas basin, and his leadership and guidance for me personally has been very much appreciated, and his knowledge base is going to be very missed. So hopefully we can still call on you in the future to help us. But I'd just like to say thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Steve, I wanted to echo that and just say thank you for your years of service to the division, to the department. I often tell young people that one of the most important assets they have is their credibility. And you spend an entire career compiling it and bolstering it, and you can lose it in an instant. And to do what you've done for 40 years without ever having that slip up is a testament to your abilities and your judgment. And I just want to say thank you.
No?
Sorry. I'm going to try not to cry. Well, Steve, I just wanted to say thank you. It's been a pleasure to work with you, especially over this last year, and be able to work alongside of someone who's so passionate about what they do. That's not everyone that has a deep passion and a responsibility for doing the right thing. And so it's been an honor to work with you, and I'm sure we will cross paths. Thank you.
All right. So I just want to, on behalf of the CWCB as a whole, thank you, Steve, for your dedication, your determination through some pretty rough times, and your integrity in the way you do your work. So, but most importantly, your desire to build relationships. I think that's a key thing that a lot of us could learn, because that's the first thing that you have to do is build a relationship in order to make anything work. So I appreciate that most of all. So thank you for your long years of service. All right, any other questions for Director Ryan? Thanks.
Mr.
Kevin.
Chair, that's my report.
All right, thanks, Kevin. So now we have the Agricultural Commissioner in place of Don Brown. We have Jen Yezek. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Chairman. That is very hard to follow. And I, too, want to congratulate you, Steve. He was one of the first people I said hello today, and I did not know of your dedication to the water of Colorado. So congratulations on your career, and congratulations on your deserved retirement. So good to meet you, and know you're from Don Brown's country on the east side of Colorado. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jen Yezek. I'm the new Deputy Commissioner of Agriculture at the Colorado Department of Agriculture. March 5th was my first day. And one of the first things that Don Brown took me to was to an Environment and Energy Working Group, where Dr. Randall was part of that activity. So I hit the ground running back in March with that working group. Just a quick background, since probably no one knows who I am at this moment, unless they read the CDA news release. I'm originally from Texas, a small town of 900 people between Dallas and Houston, or between Waco and College Station, if you know where Baylor University and Texas A&M are located. I went to school at Texas A&M, have a degree in ag ed and a master's in agriculture. I also worked in the Texas legislature, the Texas Department of Agriculture. And then in the 90s, I moved to Washington, D.C., worked for U.S. Senator Lloyd Bentsen as a legislative assistant. And I have 15 years at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, as well as working for the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture. And that is where I got to know John Stult, Don Emmett, folks y'all know real well, John Salazar, and of course, Don Brown, and all their colleagues from across the country. So that's my background, just so you know that I've been working in agriculture for more than 30 years. So I'm happy to be in Colorado. I'm glad to be on the front lines of agriculture and back in state government. I hear Don Brown gives lively reports. I do not know if I'll be able to follow suit, but I will try my best. He sends his regards. I think that's why he's happy to have a deputy again, is to be able to cover all the various meetings that he's responsible for, as well as all of the different other responsibilities as he has, including his farm and ranch out in East Colorado. As you know, the Farm Bill, from a national perspective, is been on Commissioner Brown's radar. As you know, it did not pass the U.S. House of Representatives. They think they may bring it back later in June. We look to see if the Senate can pass their Farm Bill starting in June. But that will be a piece of legislation that would be needed to provide sustainability in agriculture, because we face concerns with trade. As you know, that's been also in the news with China negotiations, NAFTA negotiations, all types of activities on trade. And so Commissioner Brown continues to follow those activities as well. Also, Commissioner Brown, as you mentioned, the Republican River, we have a conservation reserve enhancement program there that's been established for several years, but Commissioner Brown has been trying to work with the local Republican River organization there to amend the current CREP to increase additional acres. And so he's been working closely with the Farm Service Agency, as well as the Undersecretary Bill Northey at USDA, to see if those amendments could possibly get done this year. So he is making some progress there, and hopefully maybe at your next meeting we'll have more information and details. But he continues to work on that, as he reported back at your March meeting. Also at that March meeting, he reported on his plans to attend the Ogallala Summit in Garden City, Kansas on April 9th and 10th. He said it was a very good program. 8 states were there, and they need to quit suing each other, to quote him there. But Nebraska, Kansas, and Colorado, he continues to work with his counterparts in those states to continue to follow up on the activities. And as Steve mentioned in his update there, not to have paying Kansas anymore. So he continues to do his part as Ag Commissioner, working with those states. You may have also read in the papers that Agriculture Secretary Perdue was in the state of Colorado. Commissioner Brown and myself were able to join him at the Hurricata Farms in Otero County to witness how the land is, being a very drought area. He also went to Cicadas in Brighton. And he also met with producers at the Colorado Department of Agriculture. And there's a couple of folks, I think, in the audience that were there. So it was good for him to see firsthand what's going on in agriculture in Colorado. As Director Randall mentioned, the USDA has designated several states as primary disaster areas due to drought. There are 24 counties along with 18 contiguous counties. And as Commissioner Brown has said, he likes to have pictures. And so this is a picture of the primary counties and the contiguous counties in the state of Colorado. So that continues to be a major concern. And I heard on the radio how Salida has to follow certain water restrictions on their lawns. So I can see it's clearly folks are taking their steps as individuals and as groups in this area to handle the drought. I know most of you, or many of you, could have been at the Water in the West Symposium. From Commissioner Brown's perspective, maybe not many in agriculture were actually in the attendance at the conference, but many of the speakers did talk about how, and there was agreement that agriculture is going to be very important to all the work moving forward in regards to water in Colorado. So I'm happy to be here, be part of this state, and to work with all of you and meet all of you as well. I did attend the reception briefly last night and heard the presentations about the monarch. And so it's good to be here, and I look forward to working with all of you and representing Commissioner Brown at future meetings. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jen. Are there any questions? All right. Thanks again. So now we have our own CWCB Director's Report.
Thank you. The first thing I wanted to touch on is the fact that projects bill went through. I probably should apologize that I didn't send out an immediate blast, but the projects bill was passed. The governor is yet to sign it, but we are, doesn't seem to be a problem there. We would have already heard it.
I did find out that it'll get signed this week, so.
Oh, right.
We'll let you all know.
So that's an important source of our funding. And so we follow that closely. And there was a lot of hard work that happened, both from the board's role and from staff's role. So I wanted to thank everybody that was involved with that. That was a big push. Probably one of the biggest things since we last met was that our board members were confirmed. That happened last month, and that was a great and fulfilling ordeal. And so I wanted to personally welcome Steve Anderson and current Director Anderson and Director Trick. I am excited about our future as we look at the board members that have come on and the board members that have been with us for a little bit. We really, there's great relationships that have already built with those folks, and great mentorship that has already been occurring, and so I'm excited. That's probably one of the biggest things that's happened since our last meeting. But there's some other things too. I wanted to touch on some of what Bob mentioned with the drought activation. That I think it's critical to know that drought has been activated. But when we get out and when staff gets out on the ground, one of the things that is asked is, what does that mean for us in terms of funding? So I wanted to talk about that just a little bit. Activating the drought plan opens up some limited state funds, such as the Agricultural Emergency Drought Response Program. And there are some other state programs that may be able to be utilized to aid in impacted areas. But I think it's important to recognize that the majority of the funds come from the federal government, and we work closely with our partners at the federal government to make sure that the communities that are most affected, the money is directed in that area. So that's really a lot of our role at this point, is to work closely with the federal government. Primarily, we look at ag when drought is activated. We look at ag first. Why? Well, ag is impacted. And especially in a situation like this year where we have high reservoir storage, for for municipalities, ag is likely the first to feel the impact. But we do know that there are smaller utilities out there that have little to no storage, and we're also keeping an eye on that and implementing whatever we can do to help in those areas. This is a critical time that we work together and make sure that we are utilizing our resources in the most careful way as possible, and but really working together to come up with the answer. So in terms of the Colorado River, you're going to hear more in executive session as it relates to some of what's happened on the Colorado River since the last board meeting. A few big items I just wanted to touch on in my director's report. The UCRC met with the Central Arizona Water Conservancy District last month. There were some issues, you might have seen it in the news, about some messaging that the Central Arizona Project folks were putting out there, and how it concerned what we were doing within the state of Colorado, but all the upper basin states and other lower basin states. So the Upper Colorado River Commission took it pretty seriously and acted quickly and requested a meeting with the Central Arizona Water Conservancy District, but really the CAP leadership, the Central Arizona Project CAP leadership. So the UCRC and your own state leadership met with them and had a discussion on some of what was occurring in terms of the Colorado River. The message was very loud and clear given that Arizona needed to get their act together and do the right thing. I think there was a clear apology, not necessarily about the practices of the Central Arizona Project, but a clear apology of how they were presenting it. I think we can get into that a little bit more later, but I wanted to make sure that we recognize the impact of this as we're moving forward to do a drought contingency plan for not only the upper basin, but all the basin states, that it's important that we're all on the same page. And so with that being said, Commissioner Berman joined us at the Upper Colorado River Commission meeting after that meeting and reiterated that. And in that light, there will also be another meeting or a few meetings next month in regards to all of this. The first one will be with Commissioner Berman in the lower basin states, once again reiterating the importance of getting their drought contingency plan done. And then we'll be meeting with all the 7 basin states together, and then the upper basin states will be meeting again. So back to back to back meetings. An incredibly important topic. On some happy notes, some of what's happened, I think Director Wells will probably find this one the most enjoyable topic, but the trout tank, you'll hear more from Mara McKillop about what's happened since our last board meeting. But you may recall that the CWCB partnered with the Denver Chamber to really focus on building up water entrepreneurs. And we consider what we've been doing so far very successful at a very low cost to the CWCB. And so there were some awards given for that. One was to Renew West. That's really looking at some reforestation and creative ways to do that. And then also Running Rivers that focuses on endangered fish. So those are some big things that have happened. I wanted to, Andrew, could you put up that org chart on the computer? I wanted to talk about, I've been on the job about 10 months now, and there have been some changes that have occurred since I've been on, and I wanted to make sure that people were aware of them, especially the board. I've tried to talk to them about them at every board meeting, but sometimes it's important to see what's happened. But so I wanted to go a bit through the org chart. I put them in front of you. And you'll see that there have been a number of vacancies that have been filled since my tenure. And that was a goal of mine, is to really focus on, at this time when we're asked to do more with no additional resources, we have the same number of FTE There's no new boxes added there, but we do have more initiatives that come out. We're looking at drought and what do we do in these times. And so I've really made one of my major focuses is filling those vacancies and getting people where they can be most efficient and most useful. So I wanted to go through some of that and really show how we're rethinking things, how we do things at the agency, and also let you know when you hear about these vacancies being filled, we have been able to attract some high quality staff. Some amazing people with some amazing talent. And I think that says a lot about the agency, the board, DNR, and we're at. And we have interesting work to do. And so with that being said, when you see that there's new people there, I think it's also important to recognize that there's a responsibility from our more senior staff to work with these new people, but we've also created informal mentoring programs where we have lines of communication always open, not only to our board, but to other experts in the area. An example of that would be Randy Seaholm. We still talk to him frequently. Steve Miller, we still talk to Steve. So where there are new folks, I want you to know that these are some of the smartest people that are out there, and I'll highlight some of them, but we are very excited, and I'm excited about the future when I see these people. So the board has a hard copy of the org chart, but I want to just go through some of the things that have occurred in my last 10 months. I'm going to start at the left and I'm going to jump around because there's some other changes I want to highlight at the end. But the first, if you look at the water supply planning section, Greg Johnson's the section chief of that. That's happened since I've been on. He had a history with the board, and he was the right person to fill that role. He saw the light and he came back. I'm gonna be as gentle as possible, Greg. But as we go through the new people, I'm going to make you stand just so the board knows who they are, especially since we have some new board members. But so with that, brought a vacancy for the position right below him, which was filled by Russ Sands. Russ, if you could stand and wave. So Russ has significant technical experience. We had experience working with Russ. We're so happy to have him on board. He's primarily in charge of the Basin Roundtable organization and management and direction and the IBCC. He has some other skill sets that we've tapped into too, and his information representation, and we've gotten really creative, and so that saved the agency some money because we've previously had to contract that stuff out, and now we make him work for very cheap or free. So that's something to be aware of. Another thing in this section I wanted to bring your attention to, but not highlight it too much. Mara is moving on. She has no idea what she's doing yet. But she knows that she doesn't want to be in Denver. And we understand that she used her time at the CWCB to better herself and go get her master's and do things like that. But so I'll highlight that at a later board meeting. Going to the watershed and flood section, I think you probably see that there's 2 vacancies at the bottom of that section. I don't want you to think that I've been negligent and we haven't focused on those, but those are come from a different funding source. And so those are not going to be filled. They were temporary. The first one was NRCS flood recovery, and that project's done. The other was a project bill funding and specifically focused on natural hazard mapping. I'm going to jump to, can I say something about the deputy director? That's at the top, so I should probably say that. Lauren was hired as the deputy director since I've been.
I'm just saying.
I mean, Lauren was stolen from Director Randall, and it was one of the best deals we could have had in the agency. I'm a poker and blackjack player, and I played my hand well there. And so one of the best moves we've made, she really holds the fort down while I'm off at these Colorado River meetings, and she has a strong legislative background, and that's important for our agency to have. So I think it's always that's a change that has been hugely helpful. Next is let's go to the finance section. In the finance section, Rachel Pittenger has been on. It seems like she's been here a while because she knows a lot, and she's come from the consulting world. So very good background. Rachel, could you stand up? Yeah, you have to. And just so people know, she works on in Kirk's section and does a lot of the project coordination, project management. So you will see her out in the field. That section gets out into the field a lot, and it's incredibly important. So she's come on since in the last 10 months. So I wanted to talk about the interstate and federal section next. You'll see there's been a significant amount of change in that section. Brent Newman is the section chief for that section. He also had a significant history with the CWCB and saw the light. And then Alex Funk is that's basically right there. Thanks, Alex. That is probably one of the better moves that we've made also. This is really a restructure when you think about what that position was. And what came out of the water plan was that we really needed to spend some time focusing on agriculture and really bring some expertise into the agency as it related to agriculture and how we all work together. So Alex had a history with that. He will be managing the Water Plan Ag Viability Grant Program, as well as the Agricultural Transfer Methods Program. We're going to have that housed all in one position. So we'll have a one-stop shop. And if Alex doesn't do it, he'll be able to point you in the direction of who does. And so we really wanted to highlight that we work with agriculture. We want to work well with agriculture, and we realize we have to work together. So that was a critical move for the agency. Another change is Brian Mcpherson. I don't know if there he is. Woohoo! So you've probably met Brian. He's been at, I think, a previous board meeting, but he was relatively new then. But I wanted to highlight him. He has a significant background already with the modeling systems that we use, and so that was a good win for us. So a lot of background knowledge, and we're lucky and happy to have them. As I talk about these people, you'll hear about, you see the talent that we've brought in. Another change is JoJo Law. I don't know if she is here yet, but JoJo Law is really we had a position that was previously just the Platte River Recovery Program. We've really modified that position to be an endangered species policy specialist, and JoJo fills that role very appropriately. But she's not only responsible for the Platte River Recovery, but also the Upper Colorado River Recovery Program. And we're excited to have her. She brings some talent from the consulting world, and I'm happy that we can attract people from that sector. I think it adds a lot to our agency. With that change, Michelle Garrison has been really primarily focused on Colorado River and the modeling associated with that. Another recent change, Eric Sky has moved from his position to that vacant position, which makes another vacant position, and we'll be dealing with that one. But Eric has a history. It's a good move. We always like to look internally. If there's a possibility as we look at these vacancies, I think it's important that we build up our internal staff and really look towards the future that way. And that's how we do a lot of our succession planning. That's a good quality move. Eric says he'll never plug in another microphone. I disagree. I don't know if the job description has been signed yet, but that is we're happy to have that. And I think that's important as we move towards the future, is how do we inspire those within and reward them when we see how hard they're working and they're creating relationships. So that brings another vacancy. We'll get that taken care of hopefully before the next board meeting, and I'll be able to update you on that. Moving to the in-stream flow section, they look pretty stable. That there's no changes there, but looks can be deceiving. One of the sadder times that I have is change. I don't deal well with change. And so with this section, there's some great change that is about to occur. And so I couldn't get through my director's report without mentioning this, but we will be having a vacancy in that section due to a retirement, and that's with Jeff Basler. So he's retiring. He's worked for the state for almost 30 years. His work is directly, resulted in the protection of numerous streams across our state. Fish, bugs, birds, plants, all rely on Jeff. And he's been a dedicated member of the CWCB staff. He and Linda are very close, and so I worry about her mental well-being after Jeff leaves. I don't think folks know the work that it takes to put these recommendations up in front of you when it comes to these in-stream flow recommendations, and the amount of work that goes into that, and the effort and the background work. The recommendations aren't brought to you blindly and just say, let's do a lot of streams in this area. There's so much work and effort that goes into that. And so Jeff is responsible for a lot of that. And he has been called the hardest working man in state government. And I think that's pretty true. But more importantly, and one of the things we look for in staff is something that Jeff has, and he's funny. And I've gotten to carpool with Jeff a few times, but he makes us laugh all the time, both in the car and in the office. And he's just an amazing person. So Jeff, if you could come up and say a few things.
Thank you. Thank you. I've thought about over the last probably 3 months since I announced my retirement, I've had people come up to me and say, well, how many in-stream flows are you responsible for? Hundreds, thousands? And, I've thought about that. And really, the answer to that is zero. I'm not responsible for any in-stream flows by myself because it's always been a team effort. It's always been a we. You mentioned, and who is that we? You mentioned Linda. Some of you may have heard me refer to her as my work wife. It's amazing. I wake up in the morning and my wife says something to me, and I talk to her, and then she looks at me. She's like, "Oh, come on, Jeff." And then I go to the office, and then Linda comes in my office, and we start talking, and I start to say something. She looks at me and says, "Oh, come on, Jeff." They can see right through me. It's really uncomfortable. But it's not just Linda. It's also the in-stream flow team that Linda and I built. It's Don and Kaylee and Kim and Brandy and Rob and Jack Landers, our new hydrographer. It was Brian before that, and some of you may remember Owen Williams, and there's tons of people before that were on the in-stream flow section. So a lot of people have been involved in this effort. You're going to be seeing a lot more of Rob and Brandy. Linda, a few months ago, asked me to put together a succession plan, and what we came up with was to bifurcate my job and have Rob take over sort of the new appropriations portion of it, and then all the work I did with the stream gauge and the science, putting that together to support the recommendations. Brandy Logan is going to be doing those things. So that's something that's going to happen here, and that I think is really going to make the program move forward. It's not just the other way, though, is not just the in-stream flow section. It's the entire in-stream flow staff. A number of years ago, we had some discussion about, or did we need to change the way the CWCB staff operated, and were we in silos, and did we need to break apart the silos? And I've never felt that I was in a silo. If I have a question with something on a non-reimbursable, I go back and I talk to Kirk. If there's a stream flow management plan, I talk to Chris. So it's a family, it's a team, and so they're responsible. We couldn't do anything without the AG's office. The AG's office, you wouldn't have an in-stream flow program. And Laura, your staff is wonderful. and the staffs before them, Susan Schneider and Jen's team and everything. And they keep on winning too. You don't know how good it feels to to have an attorney call you up and say, the judge sided with us on our motion, or or even a Supreme Court case. That's great. It makes your day. It really does. So I appreciate the AGs, our recommenders. You got to thank them. You got BLM, you got Roy Smith and all the area managers, Jay Skinner, the in-stream flow coordinator, all the biologists involved. There are a lot of people involved in making recommendations. Conservation groups who have come along and who have been, in the past, maybe talking things about public trust and stuff, but now they're having faith in the in-stream flow program and partnering with us, making recommendations. State and Division's Engineer's Office, being able to call up Kevin or his division engineer and say, hey, I've got a new issue with an in-stream flow. I'm not quite sure how to handle it. And having Kevin come down and meet with Linda and I and work it out. So there's that. And then last but not least, there's you. There's the board. You guys have been great. And Bob, you said something about, it's your integrity and your relationships, and I've developed some really good relationships. I've learned a lot from the board members. Remember Travis Smith, I saw him in the back of the room there, coming up to me and early on in my career saying to me, Jeff, it's about the relationships. You got to talk to these people. And that's so true. But yeah, your counsel and talking with Linda and I and advising us and all of the time you put in, I really appreciate it. So it's a we. We did the in-stream flows, the new appropriations, and I just want to thank you for that. And another thing, when I think about leaving the state in 30 years, I've always had a very strong conservation ethic and environmental ethic and stewardship, and it's just the way I was brought up. And you worry about that, what's going to happen in the future and everything. You know what? I feel great. I'm not worried at all because of the team of people. It's a community, it's a family, and Colorado will go on. So thank you.
So much, Jeff. That is all that I have. I'm excited about our future. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. We appreciate all your work. All right, we'll continue to move on. We have the Division of Parks and Wildlife, and filling in for Bob Broscheid is Brett Ackerman. So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, and good morning. My name is Brett Ackerman. I'm a Deputy Regional Manager for the Southeast Region, which is essentially the Arkansas Basin and the South Republican drainages. And you don't know how refreshing it is to be able to describe my region that way to people that know what I'm talking about. So it's nice to be here with you this morning. You may have noted as Director Randall mentioned, he's down in Pueblo with the governor today signing the bill and the Aquatic Nuisance Species bill. And appreciate, of course, Director Randall and his staff and all those who worked on this bill. As with much legislation, it was a heavy lift, and excited to get that signed today. It's a great day for conservation and a great day for Coloradans to enjoy the outdoors. I do have a couple of updates on behalf of the director today. I was joking with Mr. Chairman last night about how, oh, thank you, Director. I was joking with the chairman last night about how I'd like to say you got the B team today, but Jackie Corday is out of town. Jay Skinner's out of town. Our regional manager is with the director today, so we're about halfway through the alphabet today. But I do have at least some bullet points to go off of today, Mr. Chairman. We certainly are concerned about drought, and our staff is monitoring and working with our sister agencies and others with regard to drought preparation. One of the things that we're working on is updating our administrative directive A9, which is the directive that implements a statute out of Title 37 that allows for municipalities to request CPW water in times of drought when they've exhausted their supplies. They've implemented a drought plan among several other stipulations. And so in preparation, but hopefully for not having a prolonged drought, we're making sure that the procedures are in place for that. Our staff also is attending monthly water availability task force meetings, and we're certainly giving input to updating the statewide drought mitigation and response plan. And one of the innovative things that we're working on at the behest of Colorado Water Trust is an analysis of our water rights management and looking at some of our portfolio to see where in times of emergency or times of drought, we might be able to manage our water use in a way that augments in-stream flow programs. So we're focusing on a few rights in the Southwest as kind of a pilot at this point, and we're running those to ground to see what it would look like if we're able to take some of our water portfolio when needed and augment in-stream flows in specific areas. I also wanted to mention the In-Stream Flow Council Flow 2018 workshop in Fort Collins that took place with CWCB and CPW support and sponsorship. There were 210 attendees and 39 states and provinces, and there was an international slate of speakers, and I understand it was a great conference this year. Also, as Jeff mentioned in his comments, Jay Skinner is the in-stream flow coordinator for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. He'll be following in Jeff's footsteps and retiring soon as well. We have hired a new in-stream flow coordinator, Katie Birch, who comes to us from the private sector with Wilson Water. And she'll be introduced to the board at the July meeting with your permission, Mr. Chair. We've invited Jay Skinner to stay on board with us through the remainder of this calendar year, and he'll be working in tandem with her and training her. And they'll both, again, with your permission, Mr. Chair, attend your meetings for the rest of this calendar year. That said, Director Randall mentioned the Partners Conference that took place in Summit County this year, and I just wanted to piggyback off his comments a little bit, and again, thank him for his support of this great conference. It started as a way for us to recognize our numerous partners throughout the state and the efforts that go forth on behalf of Colorado's parks and wildlife, and has really blossomed into starting to be a premier event for collaboration and coordination across the breadth of outdoor interests. And I joke that the number of sandals is closely approximating the number of cowboy boots at this meeting. So it's a pretty neat thing to see. Finally, Mr. Chair, just wanted to also recognize and thank Steve Whitty and hope that he'll please accept our CPW's appreciation for his great service. And we want to thank him for a great career on behalf of the state of Colorado. With that, Mr. Chairman, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to pass those on to members of our staff that might know the answer.
Do we have any questions for Brett or his staff? All right. Thanks, Brett. Thanks for coming up. All right. So I don't believe we have anyone here from the Water and Power Authority. So that will conclude agenda item 6. And we'll move on to agenda item 7. Kirk.
Good morning. Kirk Russell, Finance Section Chief. Mike Broad sends his regards. He always enjoys coming up to speak in front of the board. So he let me know that he was signing some large bonds today and was not able to break away from Denver. Agenda item, is it 7A, is a information only item for the new directors. There will be no action on this. And I want to echo Becky's comment in regards to the new staff. We've got some great energy coming in, great personality. So I'm looking forward to that. And then certainly seeing the departure of some retiring folks and getting to work with Steve Whitty over the years has been just incredible. So we wish him well as he does his next endeavor. An update on the projects bill, in reference to the projects bill, it went very smooth this year, and I give a lot of credit to Doug Bilsack, his efforts as our legislative liaison, and certainly Director Mitchell and Lauren in their presentations to the board. It went very smooth, and so much appreciated. Okay, on to this, the agenda item. The new directors might say, well, why are we doing this? And I actually thought through this myself. Why do we continue to take a look at each board meeting at the numbers inside of the accounts? We started looking at at this on a every board meeting basis back in about 2010 when the General Assembly reached in and grabbed about $170 million of cash available in our accounts. And at that time, it kind of stressed what's available. And our goal is to never authorize a dollar twice. We work on a cash basis. And so our borrowers and certainly our new grant recipients of water plan grants, it's our goal to not have not enough money in the account. So I present this. It also keeps track of all of our promises through projects bills and other legislation, but also as we move through the year. So in a general sense, the handout that I provided, the first page is the construction fund and the second page is the severance tax perpetual base fund. Those are the two major accounts that we work with. And I divide it up in a projection side and a current cash side. And this allows us to modify things as time moves throughout the year, just to stay ahead of the current projections, whether they be from the severance tax projection folks or even federal mineral lease. And also Steve Biondo, who you'll hear in a little bit with the severance tax operational account grants. He and I are constantly in communication. We get some borrowers that pay in full early. The interest rates have been very favorable recently, and we've had some borrowers paid in full. And so it's always staying on top of that. So we're aware of what is available when some large borrowers contact Anna to say what kind of magnitude is their cash available into the future. So I guess I'd like to, starting with the construction fund, that first page, the item to note, I guess I should point out as well, this is the May board meeting. So this is the last one before we end the fiscal year. So once we get to the July meeting, we'll take a look back, but we'll also be laying out the forward relative to those projections and non-reimbursables and some of the loans coming in that we're expecting. The item to start with is line number 2. Again, our goal is to project what is available at the start. That $32.4 million that you see there, that normally is around 18 million. The reason that's so high is we have had a couple significant repayments. One of them is from Windsor, the town of Windsor, for Kern Reservoir. They paid that loan off to the tune of $3 million. And Central Water Conservancy District sent us a full payment for one of their loans, and then also an early payoff on another loan to the tune of $6 million. So the number is much higher than we are used to seeing, but we'll continue to track that. Our federal mineral lease projections are based on March's projection. There'll be a new one coming out June 20th that we'll use for the next board meeting. As I move down the list here, really the focus is the 27.9 million at the bottom of the current column side on the right hand. That really tells the board what's available going forward and make sure that we can cover all of the loans that are going to be presented. So we're in good shape through some early payments. So I'll move to the severance tax perpetual base fund. And it's important to note that Director Randall talked about the legislation that's in place to help with the operational account. There is no impact to the perpetual base fund through that legislation. So we still have a requirement to refund the general fund 11.425. That would be on line number 8, and that'll happen on June 30th. And that's to refund the general fund that has been paying refunds on our behalf for the Supreme Court decision back in April of 2016. So again, starting at the top, the projections and the currents. The item of note on line number 4, as the board has heard me talk, the uncertainty of the severance tax revenues is beyond uncertain right now. As I've shown you many times, there's the volatility that exists, and the projections can be plus or minus a significant percent. We're now dealing with those the refunds that are planned, and it was interesting in April, which is normally a high month of receipts from severance tax. We received news from DNR that the perpetual base fund had received $10 million in that one particular month. And you've heard me talk routinely that my average for the year I project is about 40 million. That could change based on this BP decision, but 1/4 of a normal year's average came in that 1 month. I don't get too excited other than to know at least it's not a -10. But we still hold our breath that, we'll be able to hold some of that throughout this fiscal year and not have to refund it. So I'm still saying, let's just assume the worst case scenario and celebrate if we do have excess revenue at the end of this fiscal year. So I'm still projecting that it's a 0 number in case there's a significant refund that has to go out the door before the end of the fiscal year. But it will have a significant impact on that bottom line under balance at line 25. That 3.38 million could be upwards of 25 million if the refunds aren't needed to pay off the refunds for the producers in their taxes. I think that's all I wanted to highlight on this. We're in good shape. A lot of moving parts now that the projects bill we expect to be approved here soon, and I'll update this in July and we'll close this out. And just a reminder, we go through a audit in September, October of each year, and so these numbers get back checked by those auditors. Let me make one more comment and I'll open to questions. We have a loan that is beyond the threshold of 60-day limit that the board has on our policy, in a policy, and it is with the Two Rivers Water Company. That loan was due in the 1st of March, and so we're now past the 60 days, and so we will be communicating with them directly and working through some details. So I'll update the board on the status of that in July. Obviously, we hope for success and don't need to take any drastic measures to go through collections, but I'll let you know more in July. And that's it for my presentation.
All right, thank you, Kirk. Are there any questions for Kirk? All right.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to agenda item 8A, water project loan and grant with the Ogilvy Irrigating District. Rachel Pittenger.